All right, so last Thursday we talked about when do you use the preterite and when do you use the imperfect past tenses. And remember that the preterite was used for one-time events that had a definite beginning, middle, or especially end, and that we use the imperfect when we're talking about an event in the past that was ongoing or habitual or repeated. It wasn't just a one-time event. Okay, so a lot of times things like background information tend to be in the imperfect. So if you look at the model here, you're going to have to know a couple of things. You're going to have to know how to conjugate the imperfect, and you're going to have to know how to conjugate the preterite to be able to do this activity. And you're going to have to know what your subject is, right? And whether to use the preterite or the imperfect. So, which was the concept we covered last Thursday. When do you use each one? So when you have an action that is interrupted by another action. So for example, if I was talking about the story of Goldilocks and I said Goldilocks was sleeping when the bears returned. Okay. Was sleeping, that was an ongoing action that was interrupted by a one-time other action. They returned one time, right? So that would be the beginning of that sentence in Spanish would be an imperfect. In English, we do things like was and ing, which is what I did. And then the second interrupting activity would be in the preterite, right? So the model sentence that you have here is basically that type of sentence, and you do have to include a sentence like this in your fairy tale project. So remember that, right? You need to have a sentence where you have an ongoing action that gets interrupted by a one-time event in the preterite. So this is, yo estaba escribiendo cuando mi hermana entró en mi cuarto. So I was writing when my sister entered my room. Okay, so was writing, ongoing action. My sister entered the room one time. Okay. The next sentence that you have to complete actually functions like that. So we have Natalia and we have saltar, which means to jump. And then Mateo and gritar, which means to yell. So basically what we're trying to write here is that Natalia was jumping when Mateo yelled. So saltar is an AR verb. And for the él or ella form, it's ABA, right? And then we have when Mateo yelled, so that's going to be in the preterite. Hopefully you remember that the preterite ending for an AR verb in the él or ella form is just an O with an accent. For the next one, we have that my friends went to the movies last night. Last night is one of those words that I showed you last Thursday when you were supposed to take notes that indicates that something happened one time and would therefore be in the preterite. And remember that when we did ir and ser in the preterite tense, that was the fui, fuiste, fue, fueron, or fuimos and fueron, right? And in this case, we have my friends went, so it would be the ellos form, fueron, and that would be in the preterite. So this one's a little bit different. My friends went to the movies every Friday, cada viernes. So that is basically another trigger phrase that's going to tell you that it's going to be in the imperfect, right? Because if it was every Friday, then it was a repeated action. This is one of the few irregulars in the imperfect tense. And it's the ellos form. So a veces, this is actually, the phrase a veces means sometimes. That already tells me that this event happened more than once and was probably repeated, okay? So we want to say that sometimes Mario walked home. A veces Mario. And caminar is an AR verb. Caminaba a casa. Again, here's a phrase that kind of gives you a hint that this is going to be in the preterite. Anoche, last night, implies that this event happened once. It happened last night. Okay. Hacer was one of the flat out irregulars in the preterite. Do you remember they had the irregular stems? So this was a stem for hacer. And then the irregular preterites had their own set of endings, right? And the yo ending was y. Hice mi tarea. So you have, again, you've got another example of a sentence here where you had an ongoing action at the beginning of the sentence that is interrupted by another action. Okay, so we were driving when a toad jumped in front of actually a frog jumped in front of the car. Okay, so we were driving, that's going to be an ongoing action that gets interrupted. So remember that this is the only form where you're going to have an accent. And the toad jumped, or the frog jumped once, so preterite. Every day, so every day already tells me this is a repeated action. Okay, cada día. Selena y yo, Selena and I would go out at 7 o'clock in the morning. Okay, or would leave at 7 o'clock in the morning. So salir is going to be an imperfect because this is a repeated action, right? And remember that ER and IR verbs in the imperfect tense, they're the IA ones, right? So, and it's nosotros. That's weird. It didn't give me a check. But anyway, that's how you do that one.